The bell above the boutique door gave a soft chime as she stepped inside, but no one looked up. She took 2 steps into the space before the scent of fresh leather and expensive perfume met her. Everything was curated, the marble floors without a single scuff, the shelves lined with just the right amount of product, and the silence broken only by the gentle whisper of classical music playing low through hidden speakers. It was the kind of store where people didn't browse. They selected quietly, confidently. She moved with that same confidence. Pressed charcoal slacks, a camel cashmere sweater that draped like it had been made for her. Her hair in a neat low bun, not a strand out of place. No visible logos, no oversized sunglasses. Just presence. She carried a small, structured bag, deep green and understated, the kind of piece you only recognized if you already knew what it cost. Still, no one greeted her. The woman behind the counter, white, late 30s, in a sleek black shift dress glanced up and then immediately turned her attention to a white woman examining a display of earrings. A second sales associate was folding scarves, her hands moving with trained precision, eyes deliberately avoiding the new arrival. She didn't flinch. She had not come in to be noticed. She had come in to find something. Something specific. She'd seen it online a month ago, called ahead to ask if this location had it in stock. They said yes. No need to hold it, she'd said. I'll be in soon. And now, here she was. She drifted past the first table slowly, letting her fingertips graze the edge of a glass case. Rings, each nestled in velvet, each marked with a 4-digit price tag. She didn't pause. She wasn't here for jewelry. She walked past the shoes, past the display of handbags they kept in a locked case with gold accents, and made her way toward the back, where the coats hung on slender racks spaced far apart, each one carefully spotlighted. Still, no one asked if she needed help. She didn't need them to. She found it on her own, the coat she had come for, a long wool piece in slate gray, sharp-shouldered and belted at the waist, collar structured and elegant. She lifted the hanger, felt the weight of the fabric, studied the seams. She could see the tailoring in the way it held its shape. She smiled faintly. Behind her, the 2 saleswomen spoke softly again, laughter slipping between their words. One of them glanced in her direction, then quickly away. She said nothing. She didn't come in to prove she could afford it. She didn't come in to make a point. She came in because she liked beautiful things, because she respected quality, because she understood value. And soon they would too, just not in the way they expected. She had been standing near the coat display for several minutes, quietly admiring the fabric and construction, when the door behind her opened, and a white woman walked in wearing designer sneakers and an oversized logo sweatshirt. The bell chimed again, same as when she had entered, but this time it worked. The saleswoman at the counter looked up immediately. "Welcome in," she said, voice light and sweet, already stepping out from behind the desk. "Let me know if there's anything you'd like to see." The new customer smiled and nodded, her hands already reaching toward a bag on the nearest display. The saleswoman hovered beside her, chatting easily, pointing out bestsellers, offering to grab alternate colors. She watched from her corner near the coats, her fingers laced in front of her, body still, expression unreadable. No one had welcomed her, no one had offered help, no one had even asked if she was waiting for someone. She did not take it personally, she took it as confirmation. The air in the boutique shifted subtly when the other customer arrived, as if her presence had activated something everyone else had been holding back. The laughter between staff returned, the lights felt warmer. The silence that had wrapped itself around her like a warning started to loosen, but it did not belong to her. She waited, gave him time, gave him a chance. When it became clear that no one would come to her, she stepped forward. She approached the front counter where the second saleswoman was now folding tissue paper, her hands moving quickly but not so quickly. She could pretend not to see the woman standing just a few feet away. "Hi," she said calmly, her voice level, her tone as soft as it was steady. "I was wondering if I could see the slate wool coat in my size." The saleswoman finally looked at her. Her eyes moved quickly, coat to bag to shoes to face, then came the smile. It was the kind of smile that didn't touch the eyes. A practiced curve of the lips. "That's one of our higher-end pieces," she said gently, as if explaining something difficult to a child. "They start at over $2,000. She let the words hang there, waiting to see how they would land. The black woman nodded once. "That's fine." The saleswoman didn't move. "I can check if we have your size in the back," she added, almost like an afterthought before turning away and disappearing into the stockroom. No apology for the delay. No offer to bring other options. Just distance wrapped in a sentence. She stood there, in the middle of the store, alone again, surrounded by quiet and fabric and assumptions. She had not touched anything, had not raised her voice, had not asked for special treatment. But she had asked to be seen, and that apparently was the problem. So she waited. Not for the coat. For the moment. Because she had walked into rooms like this before, and she always left with more than what they thought she came for. The saleswoman returned from the back room without a coat in her hands. She approached with the same expressionless smile, the one used to mask condescension with courtesy. Her voice stayed light as she said, "It looks like we don't have that size in stock at the moment. Sorry about that." Then she turned away before a response could come. The black woman stood there for a second longer, her hands still at her sides, the air around her just as heavy as when she had walked in. She had heard apologies before, had seen this kind of service draped in politeness but hollow at the core. She didn't need to hear it again. She nodded. Once. A gesture without emotion. No frustration, no deep sigh. No retort about customer service or professionalism. She simply stepped back from the counter and returned to the center of the boutique, her eyes scanning the racks again as if the interaction had never happened. But it had, and it had been loud in its silence. She moved with deliberate stillness, browsing slowly, her fingertips grazing fabric but never lingering. The employees watched her, though they pretended not to. One folded scarves with extra attention. Another disappeared into the back under the excuse of restocking. No one offered help. No one returned. She did not chase their kindness. She had already outgrown the need for that. Her shoes made no sound on the polished floor, but her presence still carried. The light from the storefront reflected faintly against her skin, catching the subtle shimmer of her earrings, the quiet luxury of her coat. She walked past handbags worth thousands, clutches displayed like trophies, heels perched like sculpture. They saw her and chose to look away. She saw them and chose to stay. Because she knew what they believed. They thought they understood what wealth looked like, what belonging looked like. They thought it came in louder forms, flashier ones, logos you could see from across the room. They thought it walked with noise. She had let people believe that before. She had stood in too many rooms where the assumptions were louder than the welcome. She had smiled through it. She had walked past it. And she had built everything in spite of it. She didn't need their respect to buy what they sold. She didn't need their approval to carry more than they could imagine. Because the truth was, the coat she had asked for, she already had one. It hung in her closet at home. She had ordered it weeks ago from another city, another boutique that knew her by name and never once asked her to prove her place in the room. She hadn't come here to buy something she needed. She had come here to see if they deserved the sale. And now, she had her answer. She stayed a few minutes longer, not to browse, to watch, to wait, to let the moment settle fully into the space they had built to exclude her. Because she was never just a customer. She was the lesson they wouldn't recognize until it was too late. Her name didn't live on runways or magazine covers. You wouldn't see her at Fashion Week parties or tagged in influencer reels. She didn't announce herself in the loud, curated ways that turned luxury into performance. Instead, she existed beneath the shine, behind the numbers, beneath the brands others proudly wore on their backs. She built quietly. Before she ever walked into that boutique, her name had already passed through that district in fine print on quarterly sales reports, on the contracts that secured distribution rights for 2 emerging European labels now climbing the charts. While others collected handbags, she funded the designers. While others browsed lookbooks, she negotiated which lines made it into which stores. The irony wasn't lost on her. Some of the very pieces on display in that boutique, those artfully lit handbags and structured coats, those exact silhouettes were sourced from the companies she helped grow. Companies whose founders had sat across from her in quiet cafes, pitching ideas while she ran the math in her mind, and decided whether she would turn their dreams into equity. She said little, always, but when she signed, her signature moved markets. Not many people understood how deeply the fashion world depended on women like her. Not stylists, not socialites, but women with capital and clarity. Women who didn't want their names in lights, only on contracts. Women who could read both a room and a profit forecast in the same breath. She carried a Platinum Amex, tucked neatly in a small card holder, no metal case, no gold-plated initials, just the card, clean and crisp, next to a tightly folded list of pending acquisitions. The Amex wasn't for decoration, it was for efficiency, for access, for the things she didn't have to ask permission for. She never traveled with an assistant. She booked her own flights. She confirmed her own meetings. She preferred it that way. There were no curated stories about her wealth. No staged closets, no photos of shopping bags on marble floors, just spreadsheets, deadlines, follow-through. The boutique staff had no idea. To them, she was another quiet woman wandering through racks. They saw neutral tones and assumed she had no edge. They saw modesty and read lack. They saw a black woman with calm posture and no entourage and convinced themselves she must be pretending. But she didn't need them to know. That was the point. Her power had always lived in what people never saw coming. In the silence before the turn, in the way assumptions would always cost someone more than they expected. And when she reached into that card holder, she wouldn't need to explain a thing. They had already given her all the proof she needed. Now it was just a matter of payment. She walked back to the rack without saying a word. Her steps were measured, quiet, echoing faintly across the marble tile. The coat was still there, hanging alone at the end of the display. She reached for it, brushed her fingers along the sleeve, then lifted it gently from the hanger and folded it neatly over her arm. No one offered to assist her. She carried the coat toward the counter, passing shelves of clutches and fragrance displays arranged like shrines. The saleswoman was still chatting softly with the white customer, laughing at something that didn't sound particularly funny. When she noticed movement from the corner of her eye, she turned and froze, just for a second. The black woman stood there, coat in hand, waiting at the register. The saleswoman's smile tightened. The friendly tone drained from her voice as she finished her conversation quickly and made her way over. She said nothing at first. Just looked at the coat. Then at the woman holding it. Her eyes flicked to the price tag as if to confirm something. "That's a limited cut," she said finally. Very few of those were produced. The woman said nothing. She waited. The saleswoman shifted slightly, eyes darting between her and the coat again. "Will that be all?" she asked, her voice suddenly bright and thin, like glass held under pressure. She gave a single nod, slow and precise. Then she reached into her bag. No flourish, no performance. Just the practiced ease of someone who knew where everything was kept. She pulled out a slender leather wallet and slid it open. No cash. No coupons, no searching. She removed the Platinum Amex and placed it gently on the counter between them. It did not clatter, it landed like a sentence. The saleswoman blinked once. Her mouth parted slightly as if to say something, but she caught herself. Her hand hesitated before reaching for the card, unsure whether to move quickly or slowly, whether to smile or pretend nothing had just shifted in the air. Behind her, the associate folding scarves looked up. A pause hung in the space like breath held too long. The white customer she had been helping glanced over from a distance. The tone in the room changed. Not loud, not obvious, just quiet recognition dressed in discomfort. The black woman stood still, eyes calm, expression unreadable. She watched the transaction unfold with the same composure she had walked in with. She didn't look triumphant. She didn't look smug. She looked like someone who expected this all along. The machine beeped. The receipt printed. The saleswoman handed over the coat with new hands, slower now, more careful. She reached for a branded bag and tissue paper and suddenly remembered how to provide service. The woman accepted it silently. No thank you. No farewell. The card slid back into her wallet. The wallet returned to her bag. And as she turned to leave, the only thing that followed her was silence. The kind of silence that comes when a room realizes it just made a very expensive mistake. The second the card made contact with the terminal, everything changed. It was subtle at first, like the shift in a room when someone important walks in but in reverse. This time, it wasn't about who entered. It was about who they finally saw. The saleswoman's eyes flicked up with a new awareness, her posture adjusting just slightly, her shoulders stiffening with something that looked like regret. She handed the receipt across the counter with both hands now, more carefully than before. Her smile returned, but this one was different, strained, performed, the kind that tried to cover too much, too late. "Would you like some water while we wrap that?" she asked quickly, already stepping away toward the back, her voice softer now, overly polished. An offer that hadn't been extended when the woman first walked in, one that arrived too late to matter. A second associatone who hadn't made eye contact once before appeared at her side with a different tone altogether. "We also just received a few exclusive pieces from our European line," she said, lifting a small folder of lookbook images. "If you're interested, I'd love to show you." She didn't answer. The black woman stood still, her bag resting neatly at her side, one hand resting gently on the counter. She didn't shift her weight, didn't lean in. Her silence said everything the store had failed to understand the first time around. The original saleswoman returned, water in hand, now speaking in a lower, more cautious register. "I'm sorry if there was any confusion earlier. It's been a very busy morning." She nodded again, the way someone does when they've heard an apology that wasn't really one. There was no need to argue the details. The facts were already written, in the quiet. The coat was wrapped with extra care now, tissue folded precisely, the branded ribbon tied just right. The saleswoman's hands moved with a sudden reverence, as if this transaction had become sacred. As if she understood too late what she had failed to recognize the moment this customer walked in. There was a weight in the air now. Not of guilt, not entirely, but of realization. Of recognition arriving after it could do any good. The woman took the bag without a word. No final glance. No tight smile meant to soften the discomfort. She had done nothing wrong. She had walked in the same way anyone else would have. She had asked a single question. She had waited. She had paid. And now she would leave with more than the coat she came for. Because they would remember her. Not her name. Not her voice. But the stillness. The precision. The sharpness of dignity held so tightly it could not be dismissed. And no matter how many times they wiped down the counters or rearranged the displays, the moment would remain, settled into the walls like dust they couldn't scrub out. The kind of moment that lingers. The kind you don't talk about, but never forget. She walked toward the door the same way she had entered measured steps, shoulders relaxed, no rush in her movement. The bag in her hand, now wrapped with care and ribbon, swung gently at her side. Nothing in her expression had changed. She wasn't smiling, wasn't scowling, her face remained composed, unreadable, as if none of it mattered enough to show emotion. The boutique was quiet now. No more laughter behind the counter, no more whispered comments about who belonged where. The woman folding scarves had stopped mid-motion. The other associate who had offered a last-minute pitch now stood beside a mannequin, pretending to adjust a jacket sleeve. The saleswoman behind the counter who had ignored her, corrected her, then wrapped her purchase in apologetic. Silence watched her go, but didn't say goodbye. She looked as if she wanted to, but the words stayed stuck somewhere behind her pride and her fear of being exposed. The door opened with a gentle chime, the same sound it made when she first arrived. This time, though, every head turned. Outside, the street hummed with life shoppers passing by, traffic crawling along, sunlight catching the polished windows. But inside the store, nothing moved. The air held still, stretched tight with the kind of realization that only hits when it's too late to change anything. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. They would remember her. Not because she made a scene, not because she demanded attention or raised her voice, but because she didn't. Because she let them fill the silence with their assumptions and stood still long enough to let them hear what that silence really sounded like. It sounded like discomfort. It sounded like missed opportunity. It sounded like a Platinum Amex sliding across a marble counter without explanation, without flash, without permission. The kind of sound that now lived in the back of every staff member's mind. Next time, they would hesitate. Not out of fear, but out of memory. They would see someone else walk through that door dressed in soft fabrics instead of visible labels, carrying stillness instead of status and they would pause. Because now they understood that quiet doesn't mean lacking, and dignity doesn't mean small. Now, they knew that power sometimes wears cashmere and keeps its voice low, that the people who could change everything about a space don't need to prove anything before they choose to leave. And while they might not remember her face, they would remember the lesson she left behind. Not a quote. Not a confrontation. Just a moment. Just the way it felt when she walked in invisible and walked out unforgettable.